Welcome to LOA Today. Walt Thiessen and life coach Cindie Chavez here. Today is Tuesday, September the 4th, 2018, 8 a.m. Eastern Time, your first daily dose of happy for the day. And as it turns out, the second one for the week because we actually took yesterday afternoon off. Louise and I went off on Labor Day to do a little day trip and got away and got down to the shoreline. There's a nice little state park in Rhode Island that's about hour and a half, 2 hours away that we drove to, and it's one of those state parks. It's a state park that's right on the shoreline, and if you drive down to the point, there's like this whole loop, Cindie, that you can drive around, and they have like a beach on one side, and there's like a rocky grassy area over on the other side. And we figured, we'll go down there, we'll grab one of the trees, we'll sit up our chairs under the trees, and we'll just sit there and enjoy the ocean and so forth. And we got down there and found out there weren't that many trees. In fact, there weren't any, or hardly any. And we're driving around this big loop, and there's all these people. Of course, people love the sun, so they're just, sprawled out in the sun. They got their lawn chairs, they got their picnic baskets, and all that kind of stuff. And then we came over to this one spot where there's this one scrubby set of trees, and we couldn't quite see the ground, so we weren't sure if anybody was there. We grabbed a parking spot. Louise ran off to see if anybody was there, and just as she got there, the people who were there got up and left. So we got the one set of trees on the entire property that were available. Now, that's what I call law of attraction.
That's awesome. Yeah, good job, Louise.
That was fun. Perfect. Oh, it was so beautiful. There was like 15 to 20 mile per hour winds coming off the ocean, and it just, very, very comfortable, steady breeze. It just cooled you right down, which was great because the temp was high and the humidity was high. So without that, it would have been really uncomfortable. But with that breeze, it was like, this feels so good.
Yeah, that is so nice. I just love the smell of the ocean and getting out there in the air. I don't know. And plus, when you're at the water like that, there's all those negative ions, which it's been attributed to brain function somehow and to like getting great ideas. I've heard it said that that's why people say they come up with a great idea, like in the shower, it's from the negative ions of the water somehow. But the beach is so much better. I used to go to the beach, and as soon as I would get there, I would start writing, just like in my ideas coming to me, but it's wonderful to get out there like that. That's so great. I love that you got the only trees on the property.
Yeah, wasn't that fabulous?
Yeah.
It's unbelievable, really. I mean, I know that people are sun worshipers. I'm not a sun worshiper. I really don't like having sun hot direct on my skin. It's not comfortable for me, but the nice thing about having the trees, Louise likes to get out in the sun, so she'll go park her chair in the sun. I'm about 2 feet away in the shade, and we're sitting there together, and it works.
Right,
it works great.
Exactly. I was going to say, I'm like that. It's like I want to be out there, but I would like to be under an umbrella or in the shade of somehow. Just like I don't like to necessarily get in the water, but I want to be in the boat.
Yeah, sure.
Or on the shore. I want to be near the water. I just don't want to be in the water.
I hear you. Yeah, that makes sense. And in fact, you mentioned umbrellas. There were people who had beach umbrellas, and they didn't have the good day because the wind was strong enough that it was blowing their umbrellas inside out.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, which is a little frustrating,
Well, we've been having a lot of rain here, but that doesn't mean we've been having a lot of wind. Like sometimes we have pouring rain and there's no wind, but the other day the wind had sort of kicked up, and I was just running in somewhere from the car and coming right back, but I decided to take an umbrella because it was really pouring when I got out of the car. So I got out of the car and I went in around my errand, and when I came out, the rain had started letting up, but the wind, and it was one of those really big umbrellas. It wasn't my umbrella. It was an umbrella that's in the car, like that can shade like 3 people in the rain,
Right.
And I'm not very big. I actually have a memory of when I was in kindergarten that I was holding onto an umbrella and the winds kicked up and I lifted off the ground.
No
like
kidding. Oh my God.
And my whole class saw me and they talked about it all day.
I'm sure.
It was pretty exciting when you were 5, but I felt it lifted me off the ground like a couple of times. I'm not saying I was like 5 feet off the ground. I was just, it was pulling me and I was having to pull the umbrella down. And
That's funny.
I had this memory of watching someone on the beach with a beach umbrella, a huge beach umbrella, when it caught the wind. And it's really kind of scary because it's like trying to stop a sailboat, It's like, woo.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, well, there were also there were some people who I guess were used to the winds off of the ocean there because they had brought those little 10-foot tent-like things that you see at like craft fairs and so forth.
Right.
And they had set those up, and you can stake those down, so they aren't going anywhere, right? So those were working just fine.
Well, that's exciting. I'm so glad that you got away and got to get out to a beautiful day on the beach.
Me too. Yeah, I mean,
wonderful.
The only sad part was I couldn't get to do with the podcast with Patty, but we'll do that again next week, and I'll even give our listeners a little heads up because we're going to have a special guest on that particular podcast next week.
Ooh.
We're having somebody join us named Julie Ryan, who is one of the hosts of the Law of Attraction Radio Network, which is, I think, the highest rated Law of Attraction podcast on iPhone. And so she's going to come and just talk LOA with us, which is going to be great. It's going to be fun.
Exciting.
Yeah, it's going to be really fun.
Very good. Yay. Yeah. All kinds of good things happening.
All kinds of good things. How about that? Isn't it great what happens when you feel good?
Oh, it really is. That's funny because I was thinking about, I don't know that these two things are connected, but I was thinking about the idea when you said, guess what, we're having a special guest and you'd been away at the beach, is that I've actually had given this advice to clients professionally before. And that is that sometimes when we're feeling stuck or we really need something to happen and it's just not happening, we really feel like we need a shift. Sometimes getting out of town is the best thing we can do.
It's true.
I don't know why, but things shift. I think it's that the way we think shifts. I even read an article one time that was talking about the difference in our brain function when we're in another town, especially another town we're not super familiar with, because when we're in our own space, we kind of go on autopilot. Like we can run all our errands and do all the things we do in a course of a day without really thinking it through too much. Like we just know all the streets, we know all the places, we are in a routine. And that when we go out of town and we don't really have that familiarity, that our brain goes into a more kind of hyper-vigilant state. It's more aware because it has to be more aware.
Sure, yeah.
Because we're looking for things like, wait, is that the right street? And is the restaurant we're headed to, is it on this corner? We're like looking. And that change in our brain function actually, it's beneficial to us in the area of law of attraction, conscious creation. So
yeah, it does make a difference. I mean, I think part of it too is the difference of what it's like to go on vacation versus what it's like to go into work. Because when you go away on vacation, there's an anticipation that's involved. You kind of, you look forward to it, right?
Mm-hmm. And also that expectation of new things and things being a bit of an adventure that we don't generally have going into.
Which shakes things up. I think that's it right there. It shakes things up. It shakes up the old routine. You talked about being stuck. The best way to become unstuck is to change the routine. Right,
exactly. And that's exactly when I bring this up with people, I realize that not everybody can say, well, that does it then. I'm going out of town tomorrow, right? We can't always just go on a trip. And so sometimes just taking a different route, or maybe if you always go grocery shopping at this particular store, go to that other one, or shake up your actual routine in the morning. Like, I'm a real stickler for sort of getting into a routine and doing the exact same thing. And we can just do it a little bit differently. If you usually go for a walk at a certain time, do it at a different time. Or if you usually, get dressed before you eat breakfast first. Just kind of shake things up, like you said, a little bit. And that sort of has the same effect on the brain. And it really can get us unstuck when we're feeling stuck.
Yeah. Yep. And it's not guaranteed to keep us permanently unstuck, but just the shaking up indicates, okay, anything that we do to shift changes things. It changes the way we feel about stuff, even for a moment. So now we know, okay, just keep mixing it up.
Right. And nothing's permanent, so.
Right. Right. But that's just it. When you're stuck, it feels like it's permanent.
Sure does, yeah. And that's a good point. And this is it. It's just shake it up. Shake it up a little bit.
Something I was talking about on the last two podcasts with Tom Wells yesterday and with Anne Marie on Sunday was an article that I had read that identified 4 different ways to get yourself happy using what's been discovered by positive psychologists. And they were mostly stuff that would not be of any surprise to us. The first one was change your thoughts to positive thoughts. Like, oh, really?
Okay.
That's good. I like that. Yeah. Second one was change your diet. Although, interestingly, there was a caveat there. Excuse me, because apparently what a lot of people have been suggesting, and I found a lot of popular web pages supporting this. They've been suggesting, well, eat foods with tryptophan in them because tryptophan will generate the creation of serotonin. And serotonin, of course, is the happy neurotransmitter.
Right.
Except there's a little flaw with the theory. The flaw is that it creates it in the gut, and there's a thing called a blood-brain barrier, and it never actually gets to the brain. So that particular approach isn't quite ironed out yet. They still have a little work to do on that one, trying to figure out how to get the serotonin to the brain. But it's promising anyway. Third one is exercise, which makes a lot of sense. Anybody who's ever heard of a runner's high, well, that's what that is. It's feeling good because you got the neurotransmitters going. But the fourth one, I guess it was one I should have known, but it just surprised me. It was bright light. Apparently, if you have really, really lit area, like being out in a bright sunny day, it will actually improve your mood just by being exposed to that light. And so I actually went out and got myself a whole bunch of 100-watt bulbs to put in the lamps that were here in the office to brighten up the room considerably. And it certainly brightened the room considerably. I mean, it's a lot brighter than it was before. It's too early to say that it's making a huge difference, but I kind of feel like there is one. I'm not sure yet. Well,
I want to make a suggestion about that might be a little tweak, and then you'll, hopefully you won't have the reaction of like, oh, and I just bought all these 100-watt bulbs. But that full spectrum light, there are actually some light bulbs. I used to buy them all the time. I'm trying to think of the name of them, but they will say on them like true color or full spectrum.
Yeah.
And those lights have been shown to make a huge difference in mood and in productivity, all kinds of things. Like there were some experiments where, and you can probably Google it and find them, where they put full spectrum lights in classrooms. And like grades improved and morale improved and, all kinds of things, like less scuffles between students, like young students that would have little problems. Those things calm down. And it was the full spectrum light.
Now, are those the same thing as daylight bulbs? The ones that they call daylight bulbs that are emulating the color of daylight?
Maybe. I mean, I can't say 100%, but I think so, because I think it's more like being in the sun.
Okay.
And so that's really interesting, though, that you found that on the article of just 4 things, right?
Yeah,
because that's something we can kind of set and forget. Like you said, change the bulbs.
Right, yeah, there you are. So, well, I went with soft white for now. If it does make a difference, I'll have to go buy the daylight bulbs and see what they do. But
well, I started using the daylight bulbs or the true color full spectrum bulbs years ago when they first came out, because I'm an artist.
Oh, yeah.
And either working with paint or glass beads or whatever.
You need the accurate color. Oh, yeah.
For the color, right? And that's when I started hearing about the difference in people's moods when they use them. And I thought, and I can say that, I think I noticed a difference when I was using them all the time. It makes me want to replace all the bulbs again.
Exactly, right?
They're a little expensive. I mean, they're a little bit more expensive than regular bulbs. So when you're replacing all the bulbs in a house, sometimes
that's a little pricey, yeah. Well, you can do it in stages. You don't have to do it all at once, right? You could do, some this month, some next month.
Well, and replace the ones in the rooms that you're in the most often, right?
Exactly, yeah. That's why I did the office, because that's where I am most often during the day.
Right. Well, that's interesting. That's very cool.
The article, by the way, came from the National Institutes of Health, which I believe is the UK, and so it it is backed by science. There is they have the footnotes and so forth with the links to the sources and all that kind of thing. So it's one of those things I feel comfortable about. There's a lot of stuff that's out there. There are a lot of pieces of advice, people publishing things and so forth. But I've learned there is so much junk that gets published that doesn't really have anything behind it other than, well, this is what I think, but I didn't say that. I've learned to be a little careful. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I remember reading about you were talking about diet as one of the 4 things. And at the same time, and it could have been even in the same body of, work I was reading about the full spectrum light. I remember reading about a study done where they just started giving prison populations vitamins, just like a multivitamin. I mean, it wasn't any big supplementary program, right? It was just like a multivitamin, and that the violence dropped.
Really?
And so it's interesting. Diet, and we talk about this, but I tell clients this all the time especially, when you're known as the love and magic coach and people really want to come and get a big dose of something amazing and delightful and magical. And, the first questions you start asking them are about their diet and how are you sleeping? And, do you have a full spectrum bulb in your office?
Right? Yeah, that's right.
But we create our experience from the foundation and the core of who we are. And that includes a physical body that needs nutrition and enough sleep and the right light and good thoughts, right? So it really is, these foundational things really are important because we create from the foundation. And so if we're not dealing with those things, that's where we need to start.
And one of the things about that foundation is the foundation really needs to be what we really do believe or understand or think. It has to be the real thing. And we have to really believe it deep down. Otherwise, it's not a foundation. Otherwise, it's kind of floating around, not really doing a whole lot. So belief makes a really big difference. And along that same line, we're going to be talking about Oprah Winfrey today as part of our little series we've been doing about very wealthy people who are actually doing good things in the world, because we want to kind of counter that general teaching that we have that billionaires are bad people who rip people off and take advantage of them and couldn't care less about anybody else. When in fact the reality is quite the opposite. But the reality doesn't get a whole lot of press, so we're going to give it a little bit of press. That's what we're doing, right?
Yeah, I love it.
So Oprah,
and I'm so happy because
she's one of your favorites.
Yeah, definitely. So
yeah, well, I think you're not alone in that. She seems to be the favorite of a lot of people.
Yeah, definitely.
But we were talking before the beginning of the show how she's published a lot of books and probably hasn't actually written them herself. This one, actually, I know she wrote, at least to some degree, because this one is a book that came out in 2014 called What I Know for Sure. And the book is actually a collection of stuff from her journal, because she's a very avid journaler. And so she went through her journals and picked out the stuff that was about stuff she knows for sure. And the impetus... That's really great. Isn't that interesting? Yeah.
Yeah, I like that idea.
And then the impetus for it, now, I imagine she probably had a staffer who actually pulled the stuff out and said, "Do you like these?" "Oh yeah, that's good." But she wrote them. That's the point. She wrote them originally.
That would mean handing your journals over to someone.
Well, it would have to be somebody you really trust. No doubt about that. Yes. But anyway, she introduces the idea of the book by explaining where the impetus of the idea came from. It's in her introduction. She says, and I can just read it because it's a really short introduction. It says, "It's not a new story, but at least for this book, I think it's worth telling one last time. The year was 1998, and I had been promoting the movie Beloved in a live television interview with the late great Chicago Sun-Times film critic Gene Siskel. And everything was going perfectly smoothly until the time came to wrap things up. Tell me," he asked, "what do you know for sure?" Now, this was not my first rodeo. I've asked and been asked an awful lot of questions over the years, and it isn't often that I find myself at a complete loss for words, but I have to say the man managed to stop me in my tracks. About the movie?" I stammered, knowing full well that he was after something bigger, deeper, more complex, but trying to stall until I could come up with a more semi-coherent response. "No," he said, "you know what I mean. About you, your life, anything, everything." I know for sure. I know for sure I need time to think about that some more, Jean. Well, 16 years and a great deal of thought later, it has become the central question of my life. At the end of the day, what exactly do I know for sure? I've explored that question in every issue of O Magazine. In fact, what I know for sure is the name of my monthly column. And believe me, there are still plenty of times when an answer doesn't come easy. What do I know for sure? I know that if one more editor calls or emails or even sends me a smoke signal asking me where this month's installment is, I'm going to change my name and move to Timbuktu. But just when I'm ready to raise the white flag and yell, "That's it, I'm tapped out, I know nothing," I'll find myself walking the dogs or brewing a pot of chai or soaking in the tub when, out of nowhere, a little moment of crystal clarity will bring me back to something that, in my head and my heart and my gut, I absolutely do know beyond a shadow of a doubt. Now, still, I have to admit that I was a bit apprehensive when it came to rereading 14 years' worth of columns. Would it be, I guess she read them herself, would it be like looking back at old photos of me in haircuts and outfits that really ought to be left in the seemed like a good idea at the time file? I mean, what do you do if you know for sure, if what you knew for sure back in the day turns into what were you thinking here in the present?
Right.
I took a red pen, a glass of Sauvignon Blanc, a deep breath, and sat down and started to read. And as I read, what I was doing and where I was in my life when I wrote these pieces came flooding back. I instantly remembered racking my brain and searching my soul, sitting up late and waking up early, all to figure out what I've come to understand about the things that matter in life. Things like joy and resilience and awe, connection, gratitude, and possibility. I'm happy to report that what I discovered in those 14 years of columns is that when you know something, really know something, it tends to stand the test of time. Now, don't get me wrong. You live and you're open to the world and you learn. So while my core thinking remains pretty solid, I did wind up using that red pen to nip and tuck, explore and expand a few old truths and some hard-earned insights. So welcome to my own private book of revelations. And as you read all the lessons I've struggled with or cried over, run from, circled back to, made peace with, laughed about, and at long last come to know for sure, my hope is that you'll begin to ask yourself the very same question Gene Siskel asked me all those years ago. I know that what you'll find along the way will be fantastic because what you'll find will be yourself. How's that for an introduction?
Wow, fantastic. Really, I'm like putting the book into my Amazon cart.
There you go.
No, it's really profound and delightful to read or to listen. So yeah, I'm so excited about this. And it's like, really, I've never read this book. Wow.
And when we were at the shore yesterday, this is what Louise and I were doing while we were just sitting there enjoying and having our lunch and so forth. We were reading this book to each other.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Oh, I love when I hear that couples read to each other. We read to each other too. And I just think it's the most wonderful thing ever. Yes.
In fact, you know what we started with? Last week we talked about Joe Rowling, right? Well, we started with reading Harry Potter. We read the Harry Potter books to each other.
Perfect.
Yes.
Great books too. Well, I love this. And I love the whole idea of what do we know for sure?
Mm-hmm.
And I'll tell you why, and this is going to probably be in a little bit of a different context, because I can tell, or I think I can tell by the introduction to Oprah's book that, it's like what her assessment of the original question was is, oh, he's not talking about what I know about the movie. He's talking about a deeper, broader, wider thing. But it's a place that we can always go back to when our mind starts creating some story. Right? And we talk about this a lot. I mean, you and I talk about this a lot on the podcast about stories, about how our story that we tell creates our life and how important it is that we learn how to tell a better story when things aren't feeling great. And often that question, asking of myself or maybe of a client, it's like, let's go back. What do we know for sure? And a lot of times this big story that we're telling about some event that happened that we aren't happy with, or about some other person, or about some situation in our life, often what we know for sure is just a little tiny piece of it.
Mm-hmm.
And everything else is our imagination creating some big story.
Well, it's all our imagination, though, isn't it? I mean, what part of it doesn't have our imagination in it?
Well, what I'm saying is that, like, let's say someone's supposed to call and they don't call me.
Okay.
And now I'm pretty sure that they've gotten into a car wreck.
Oh.
Or I'm pretty sure that they just don't care about me and forgot all about calling me.
Gotcha.
Or I'm pretty sure that they really have bad news to tell me in this thing I'm waiting for. And so now they don't want to call, and they're struggling and stalling because they don't, all of that's just stuff I've imagined. What do I know for sure?
Yeah, so it's not so much the imagination. It's what Joel calls the awfulization. Let's make it as awful as we can, right?
Catastrophizing, right.
Catastrophizing. Yeah, that's good. I like that one.
Right? So what do I know for sure? That I know for sure that I had in my calendar they were going to call at 1:00 and they didn't call. That's all I really know for sure.
Right,
Everything else is subjective, right? So I love the idea of what I know for sure. I mean, it's a great question for us to ask in lots of different situations, whether it's a big, deep thing or not. But I'm a big fan of that question.
Well, one thing I know for sure is that we are constantly trying to get this podcast into the hands of more and more people. So let's just take a moment and ask for three things. First thing we're going to ask for is if you are a new subscriber, or I should say a new listener, and want to be a subscriber so you can get all these great episodes coming to your phone or to your tablet or whatever device you use, we say, yes, join us. We love it. And it's so easy to do. You just go to the homepage of our website, loatoday.net, and all the instructions are right there. It's very simple. Just follow the instructions. In fact, if you don't even want to browse, browse to a web page, you can just go to, on your iPhone, for instance, you can go to your podcast software that's built in and do a search on LOA Today from within that podcast software. On Android, you have to install the software first. It doesn't come built in. But just go to the Play Store, download some podcast software, lots of them out there. And once you've installed it and start to use it, just do a search there and look for LOA Today. But anyway, you do that, pop us up and click the subscribe button so you can get the shows coming right to your device every single time that we publish them automatically. Second message, for those who are existing listeners, or even for the new ones too, who are subscribing, we want you to post something on your favorite social media channel about loatoday.net and use that whole phrase, loatoday.net, include the .net part. Because what that does is it helps to not only publicize the show, it helps to reach people who you don't even know to find out about us. And that's really the cool thing. We're trying to reach people we haven't heard of yet. And so, please just take a moment to just post something somewhere on your favorite social media channel, whatever, Facebook, Twitter, whatever. Just say something about loatoday.net. Hopefully nice. Hopefully you like it, right? We really don't want a whole lot of negative publicity. We're not the Donald Trumps of the world. We actually do like, positive publicity. But
But we're not actually asking for like a review. I mean, you can even just say, I've been listening to loatoday.net.
That's it. That's a good post right there. Perfect. And then the third thing we're asking for, and this is one that we're asking for somebody who's really motivated to do it, give us a call sometime. Again, the instructions are on loatoday.net, and it's real simple. You can do it by phone. You can use the Zoom platform, which is just a quick download and connect to us that way. We also have international phone numbers. There's a link you can click on the international phone numbers and get those. But whatever way you do it, don't be shy. Give us a call sometime on any of our podcasts because we'd love to talk to you. And those are the three messages for the day. That's what I know for sure.
Well, I know for sure as well that I would love to have more callers calling in, and we always love hearing from you in any way that you reach out to contact us.
Absolutely.
It's always great. It's
really
always
is.
great to hear from you.
It's fun too when we take a call. It's so much fun. Oh my goodness, because it just shakes up the whole energy of the show and makes it even more interesting because you have that new perspective. Boy, have I ever learned the value of that word just by doing this podcast and doing it with each one of you guys, because everybody has their own perspective and it really makes it interesting. It's the spice of life, I think.
I think so too. And it's healthy.
Oh yeah.
It help, we talk a lot about brain function and right, and keeping our brain healthy, and that different perspective that we open ourselves to when we're willing to listen to other viewpoints and how other people see things. I think it's really healthy for brain function. We don't get stuck in that rut of seeing everything from the same, perspective. We're open, and just in the same way we were talking earlier about kind of shaking things up, doing things differently, that falls right into the same category. Like be open enough to listen to different perspectives. I've learned so much listening to all the different perspectives, even in the whole law of attraction community. It's amazing and wonderful to learn new things.
Oh yeah, I agree completely. And the stuff that you can pick up from others is just remarkable. I mean,
Yeah,
there's no other word for it. It's just you can pick up stuff that just like you've heard it before, but it's just said differently, and it just gives you a whole new vista of ideas about it that you didn't have before. Same concept. Very strange,
exactly.
but it's true.
So
So,
give us a call, give us a shout. Let us
absolutely,
know you're out there.
absolutely. So Oprah Winfrey. Now she definitely fits in our category of positive billionaires. According to Wikipedia, her net worth is closing in on $3 billion, which is fairly wealthy, I would say. And she has had one of the most successful television careers in America. She's world famous. I mean, she can travel almost anywhere in the world and have massive crowds showing up at whatever event that she sets herself up to do. So, I mean, I don't think we have to really make the argument, Cindie, that she has done good things in life. That she's earned her money. Let's put it that way.
Well, and I want to point out that, at some point she was told that she wasn't fit for TV.
Oh, that's true.
Right. I mean, she has definitely had her share of rejection and, in a professional way, I'm speaking, people talk about getting their manuscript rejected or having someone tell them that they, aren't right for a certain position. She's had that a lot, and
Oh,
she
yeah.
persevered. And she's also, we talked about this with each other before the show. I mean, it's one of the reasons why I get fired up talking about Oprah or learning new things about her or watching her speak is because she is a conscious creator.
Mm-hmm. She certainly is. And
She's
she's
not
very good
just a
at it.
successful person, but she actually is, she knows about this stuff, right?
And she applies it. I mean, that becomes really evident as you read the book. I mean, almost every chapter is laden in some way with her deliberately creating. She doesn't say deliberate creation, but you can tell that's what it all adds up to. And she's doing it very consciously.
And so what are there any are there any tips that you've taken away that, we can apply?
As we were just talking now, I was looking for one thing that we read yesterday, that Louise and I read yesterday about her start, because you mentioned her start in the business, and I'm not finding it
Mm-hmm.
quickly. So I may have to do it off the top of my head rather than finding the page, although I'm still hopeful. If I keep thumbing through here, maybe I'll actually spot it. But it told the story of how she got her start in radio before she even got her start in television. I mean, I think most people who are Oprah fans know how she got started in television. She was in Chicago and that particular story. But there's a
Right.
story before the story.
Okay.
The story before the story is that I don't remember what the reason was, but she walked into a radio station I believe in Tennessee called WVOX, I think it was. And she was really young. She was a very young girl at that point. I don't remember the exact age. I'm guessing her early teens. And was there, I guess, to meet the DJ. I'm not really sure what the circumstances were, but the DJ comes out and meets her, and he says, "Would you like to make a recording of yourself so you can see what you would sound like on the radio?" And of
Oh,
course, so she
wow.
was so excited by that. So they made the recording, and after they made the recording, the DJ went to the general manager and said, "You got to listen to this voice." And that's how she got her first job reading the news on a radio station.
Oh, that's a wonderful story. I had never heard it before.
Isn't that something?
Yeah.
Now, I
Yeah,
know I'm
that's really
paraphrasing a
great.
little bit because that's the part that I remember. I think there was more to what she wrote in the book, but wow. Talk about just going with your passion. Because she talks a lot in the book about how she loves to talk. She loves to, interact with. She loved to interact with her friends. Her friends were very limited when she was growing up because where she was growing up, actually, she described it that she didn't have any friends. She made friends. Her animals became her friends. Her dolls became her friends because there were no other little girls or little kids around her own age. There just weren't any. And then later on, as she got older and was, physically closer to other kids, all of a sudden that vista opened up for her. So, getting a chance to talk on the radio, that was like, that was like getting jolly green giant vegetables instead of growing them in your garden. That's the way she described it.
Oh, wow. That's so great. It brings back memories because when I was a kid, um, I used to hang out in San Francisco, and my dad worked there, owned a business there, and so in the summertime when there was no school, I would go with him, and then I would just go off and check out the city and wander around, and I would head over to the radio stations because I was a you know a music lover and listen to the radio, and that's what we would do. We would go hang out at the radio stations and see if any of the DJs came out because they were sort of they were famous.
Sure, yeah, they're local celebrities.
So, yeah. So when you're talking about Oprah Winfrey going to the radio station and meeting the DJ, and I thought that's so funny because you don't hear stories like that anymore.
That's true. That's very true. That's an old style story. It's almost disappeared in the age of the internet. Today, I mean, right? How would you go to a YouTube channel? Well, I guess you do it to post your comment or something, but you can't go there to see your favorite YouTube celebrity show up walking out the door. It doesn't work that way.
Right. Like you don't go across town and hang out in front of the radio station waiting for someone famous that you might have heard once come out and say hello. So it's kind of funny.
Yeah. I remember one time I grew up in Schenectady, New York, and there was a very small local station called WSNY. And I used to listen to that station for the popular music and so forth. And I remember one time biking downtown. We lived too far away to walk, but I biked downtown. And while I was downtown, I happened to stumble upon their offices where they were located. And I'm daring myself to try to go inside and see them. And I couldn't do it. And then I'm daring myself and I couldn't do it. I finally got up the nerve to do it, reached over for the doorknob, and it was locked. Oh. And like, oh no. Well, that was enough to scare me away, so I went away. But I keep thinking, I wonder if I had been in radio earlier, if that door had been open. I'm not sure.
And I keep thinking, like, I don't know what I said. We finally would walk into one of those big buildings, and I'm sure that there was someone, can I help you? And we're like,
right?
We don't have any reason to be there. That's great.
But apparently it worked out for Oprah because that one introduction, I mean, literally she was reading, this teenager was reading the news within a week after doing this surprise demo that nobody really anticipated was going to lead to anything. They were just giving her something to take away as a souvenir for having shown up at the radio station.
Well, I mean, there's a lot to this story that I really love. And it's not just that I've kind of, got to reminisce a little bit about something when I was a young teenager, but the idea that she was out in the world.
Yeah.
Right. And this is one of those things we talk about all the time in the realm of law of attraction and deliberately using the law of attraction to create something we want, is that what I know for sure is, something that actually I said to myself at one point, is that I said, what I know for sure is I don't know where I'm going to meet my soulmate, but it's not going to be sitting in my living room eating dinner by myself watching TV.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
Right. And it's like, some people might argue that point with me. Oh, I bet you could well, yeah, but that's like when Esther and Abraham say, I bet you could manifest a 5-star meal at McDonald's if you could focus well enough, but it's so much easier to just go to a 5-star restaurant.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right. And so knowing that anything is possible, yes.
And I can, by the way, speak to that effect because I was one of those people who sat home hoping that it would all happen. Literally.
Yeah.
I mean, I did that for quite some time. And let me tell you, I might have attracted something at some point. Well, probably not because my mood was really bad most of that time. But I might have attracted something like I wanted if I really stuck it out. But what a miserable way to have to do it. It is not fun at all.
Well, I think I told the story before about, somebody, I was working with this group and they put together every year a week in the city where women, it's called Women's Week, and where women sponsor all these events. And, there's all this really cool stuff going on, little classes and events and things everywhere. And I was working with one of their committees to get some things going. And we started talking about, I said, what about a writer's group, like where women authors read like essays they've written or something, like a listening room. And it grew into that would be great. And so, of course, they were like, "Oh, great. Well, can you put this together?" And I was like, and at that moment, I thought about, well, you know what? I know I have some friends locally that are well-known writers. That's what they do for a living, and they write for national things, right? So I thought, maybe I could call one of them. I left that meeting and I was running by the store. And right here, there's a clothing store right next to a grocery store. I thought, I'm going to walk into the clothing store for a minute. Who do you think I ran into? And I said, hey, I was just thinking about you. And that was maybe 10 years ago. And that event, that annual event, is still happening with that group of writers. Where they put on a big thing. And I haven't even been to it in the last 5 years because every time it happens, I'm out of town for some reason. But it was really cool. Like, that would have never happened. I could have just made a phone call, but the synchronicity of being out in the world and mingling around and having the opportunity to just run into someone, it made it such a better thing. Right?
Oh yeah, I can see that. Well, especially if you got those kinds of contacts. I mean, yeah, I just happen to have some friends who are nationally known writers. Yeah, really? No kidding? Wow.
Well, I mean, why does that happen? That happens because we get out and we explore the world and we meet people and we have, experiences, and those experiences generate other opportunities. I mean, that's why it's so important. And I think that's what we see in Oprah. Even when she didn't have friends because there were no other little kids around, she made friends, right? She teddy bears and dolls and other, probably, I get the idea that she may have been one of those people that was willing to strike up a conversation with whoever was around, whether they were a little kid or not.
It reminds me of a story that Joel once told in one of our podcasts a few months ago about how he had this client who had come in to see him primarily because he couldn't get work, he said. But also he was pretty depressed, and he may have been even on some substance. I can't remember for sure. But the point is, Joel's diagnosis for him, or actually his prescription was, here's what I want you to do. I want you to walk to the mall. I don't want you to go borrow a car to drive there, because the guy didn't even have his own car. I want you to walk to the mall. And the guy said to him, why would I want to walk to the mall? And Joel said, well, just go there and see if you can find some place that's offering, maybe they got a help wanted sign or something. And the guy gave him a lot of resistance, but finally agreed to do it grudgingly because he didn't have a better idea. He started walking, and I guess this was shortly after a session. So Joel had kind of beefed him up, built him up a little bit, and so forth. And he was in a better than normal mood, which meant he wasn't completely depressed. But anyway, he's walking along. And of course, when you're walking outside, it's like we talked about earlier, the light, the atmosphere, the ambiance of being out in the sun, it picks you up a bit.
Moving your body.
You're moving your body, all that stuff. So he's walking along. And as he's on his way to the mall, it gets about a third of the way, half the way. I'm not sure exactly what the distance was. He passes this used car lot. And as he's passing the used car lot, the salesman's out front and hails him and gets him involved in a jokey type conversation. Hey, we got to get you some wheels or something like that, Well, long story short, the guy ended up offering him a job on the spot. And this client was blown away. I mean, he was just out on a walk to the mall because his coach had told him, just go take a walk. And all of a sudden, he's working in a used car lot. And it was perfect for him because he had, actually, despite the depression, once he got past the depression, he actually had the personality for being a car salesman. But to this day, the guy just can't believe he went out for a walk to the mall and got a job at a car lot along the way.
And now, he's willing to do anything that his coach tells him he should do, right? Because, wow, that's magical.
And I don't remember what the net result of the story was, but I believe it was something where he ended up in sales and became very successful, something along that line. Yeah, I can't remember the exact story, but yeah. So it kind of goes to the point that you made. You got to get out. You get out. That's when things happen.
Yes, exactly. And I think, that's why I love the story that Oprah went to the radio station.
She did. Yeah. Yeah.
She was out in the world where the universe can help.
Exactly. Yeah. If you're staying at home, what you're really doing is you're putting up the path of most resistance. You're making it as hard as possible for the universe to deliver what you want it to deliver to you.
Well, and we live in a world where most things happen through people.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we connect with other people, and that's how things happen. And so we really limit ourselves when we don't.
Exactly.
When we don't make that possible by getting out there.
Now, for somebody like me, I was really shy, which I know is hard to believe because I'm doing a podcast. But I mean, I was painfully shy. Didn't want to talk to anybody. If I had realized all I had to do was go out and just walk somewhere, I could have handled that one. I'm not sure I could have handled the idea of, well, I barely did. I went up to the radio station and tried to get in and couldn't and went away. But that alone would have been really tough. But just going out, I mean, I was able to bike downtown. That part I could handle.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so you just do the part that you can handle.
Right. Exactly. It doesn't have to be hard.
That's right.
It just might feel different if it's not what we're used to doing. Right? Getting out there.
And the main thing is you can handle it. So you know you can handle it, so do that part.
Yeah, I love it. Well, that's the thing, is that once we, whatever fears hold us back and whatever stories we're telling that hold us back from getting involved, from reaching out to other people, from getting out of the house or out of wherever of the rut that we're in and getting out and connecting, those fears, once we start, I think that usually they're not as bad as we think they are. And we recognize that, you know, there are a lot of good, friendly people out there that aren't going to bite us.
Which is a little bit scary at first, believe it or not. I remember what it was like. You know, I'd actually meet somebody and all of a sudden I had to interact and I'd freeze up and all that kind of thing. And,
you know, I can understand that shyness.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I was like painfully shy as a little kid. Yeah. And I remember spending the week or weekend during a summer with some cousins, and they were older than I was. I was the youngest one. And so I was maybe 11 and I think they were like 12, 13. And they had this one friend that came over that I met, and she was very, very gregarious and friendly and laughed a lot, just, you know, very outgoing. And as soon as she met me, she just spoke to me, which kind of blew my mind. It's like, she was just talking to people she didn't even know.
Yeah,
right
how
away.
about that, right? Oh.
And I remember thinking at the time that her experience of life seemed so much better than mine because I was so shy and afraid to talk to people. And she just waltzed into the room with a big smile on her face and said, "Hey, well, it's great to meet you," and was just talking away. And I thought, this is so much better. Like, I'm done. I'm done with this.
You're done with shyness? Oh, wow. That was quite a breakthrough.
And I decided at that moment that I was going to be different. I was not going to be shy anymore. I was going to open my mouth and speak to people. And look at her. She was having a great time. It can't be this hard. Like, she's having more fun than I am. I mean, that was basically what the thought in my head was. And that was that.
Yep. Yep.
That was that. I just decided at that moment at 11 years old that I was done with being painfully shy.
I tell you, I wish I'd come to that conclusion at that point in time. That would have been wonderful. So I congratulate you. That's a terrific conclusion to come to.
Yeah, well, I look back and I go, wow. Did
I do that?
Yeah, really weird. But I'm glad I did. And I do have moments where I'm feeling more reserved, but I think back to that and I recognize, what's the worst thing that can happen? You know?
One person who we know is not shy is Oprah Winfrey.
Not at all.
Not even close to being shy. But she did, interestingly enough, because I think her background played a large role in her success. I mean, you start to see pieces of it along the way as you're reading the book and hearing her story in other sources and so forth. There's one particular chapter that I thought would be a good one to read from, because our main impetus in doing this series and talking about Oprah today is talking about people who are very wealthy.
Yes.
So I think it's probably useful to find out what her attitude about money has been. And that's what this particular chapter is about. Well, actually, the chapter is about possibility, but this little subsection is about money. So let me read this one, because this is a very early in her life story. It says, "I've always had a great relationship with money, even when I barely had any to relate to. I never feared having it, and never obsessed about what I had. Like most people, I can remember every salary I ever made. I suppose we remember because a salary helps define the value of our service, and unfortunately for some people, the value they place on themselves. I first realized I was not my salary when I was 15 and making 50 cents an hour, babysitting Mrs. Ashbury's rowdy kids, and cleaning up after she pulled nearly every outfit from her closet every time she got dressed. Her bedroom always looked like the end-of-the-day last call sale at Macy's, with shoes and brightly colored necklaces and dresses everywhere. Just before flitting out the door, without leaving any info as to where she was going or how she could be reached, she'd say, "Oh, by the way, dear, would you mind tidying things up a bit?" Well, yes, of course I did mind, and the first time I tidied up, I did such a great job, I thought surely she'd pay me extra when she saw how I had cleaned not only her room, but the kids' rooms as well. She never did. So I moved on and found a job that would pay me more, a job where I thought my efforts would be appreciated. There was a five and dime not far from my father's store, and I got hired there for $1.50 an hour. My job was to keep things straight, stock shelves, fold socks. I wasn't allowed to work the cash register or speak to customers, and I hated it. Gee, I wonder why. 2 hours in, I found myself counting the minutes to lunch and then to quitting time. Even at 15, I knew in my soul this was no way to live or make money. I was bored beyond anything I'd ever felt before or since. So, after 3 days, I quit and went to work in my father's store for no salary. I didn't like working there either, but at least I could talk to people and not feel like my spirit was being drained by the hour. Still, I knew that no matter how much my father wanted it to be, that store would not be a part of my future life. By the time I was 17, I was working in radio, making $100 a week. And that's when I made my peace with money. I decided that no matter what job I ever did, I wanted that same feeling I got when I first started in radio. The feeling of, I love this so much. Even if you didn't pay me, I'd show up every day on time and happy to be here. I recognized then what I know now for sure. If you can get paid for doing what you love, every paycheck is a bonus. Give yourself the bonus of a lifetime. Pursue your passion. Discover what you love. And then do it.
That's awesome.
That's advice from a 3 billionaire.
Right. Right. Well, I mean, I love it, and I'm curious why it sounded like she loved working at her father's store because
when she could talk to the customers. When she couldn't talk to the customers, she hated it.
Yeah. Okay. Because she made the comment that she knew that wasn't going to happen.
Right.
But she found something she loved to do,
and
had the feeling. I like that she said she made her peace with money right then, and that she knew that's how she wanted to feel. She wanted to feel the way she did when she first went to work for the radio. Like, I love this so much, I'd do it even if they weren't paying me.
Yep. Well, that's how I got started on the podcast. That's exactly how I started the podcast.
Well, I think that it's that distinction, though, of recognizing how you want to feel. Because we talk about this a lot, right? With law of attraction. It's like, well, how do you want to feel? I know it's a great coaching question to ask people, because we always make decisions because we think that we will feel a certain way. But then for some weird reason, often we don't pay attention to that. We're so concerned with doing whatever it is or having whatever it is. And it's like, well, it's not really if I had that. It's if I had that, well, then why do I want it? How would it make me feel? How do I think I'm going to feel once I get there?
And I would even add, when am I going to decide to feel that way?
Right, exactly. Like I've told the story before about the exercise that we did in school, where they asked us what we wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And they had us write how we would feel once we got it. And boy, everybody was just writing and writing. We had like 20 minutes to finish. Everybody was just writing and writing. And then when we got done, they said, what if we told you you could feel that way now? And there was a collective groan from everybody. It was like, oh, you used us.
Right.
Played us. But the truth is, it is true. We can feel that way now. And that's what I think Oprah is pointing to.
That's a great class. I don't ever remember having a class that had a lesson that was that good. That was a good one to have. You can actually choose to feel it now.
Right.
Well, I mean, if I'd had that even once, I would have been like, oh, wow, I'm so glad I had that happen.
Right. We can choose to feel it now.
Yeah.
And it sounds to me like Oprah was saying that. Like,
she was.
Whatever, whatever there is involved that has to do with money, this is the thing I need to pay attention to, is how I was feeling when I got this job.
It's a reminder to me. I mean, I love doing the podcast with you, with Wendy, with Joel, with Tom, with everybody. And yet, even when I'm doing the podcast, even when I'm feeling good doing the podcast, it's like you said, I still get so involved in the doing of it, I forget to enjoy the fact that I enjoy this. I'm loving this. This is great. This really, really, really feels good. I forget that, even though I'm in the middle of it.
Yeah, we're complicated sometimes.
We drive myself crazy.
It's complicated. Well, I love what else, in the last 5 minutes that we've got this morning, what else comes to your mind that was like really useful information from like Oprah's routine?
From Oprah's routine? That's actually kind of a tough question for me, because believe it or not, I was not an Oprah fan. I was only tangentially aware of Oprah. And for me, Oprah was somebody who gave away cars to her audience, and I thought that was silly. That was all I really knew about her. It's only in the last few years I've really had a greater awareness of her, mainly through the fact that Louise likes to watch her O channel occasionally, and watch stuff there. And some of the stuff there I thought was pretty good. So that gave me an idea of what her depth was. And she does have a lot of depth.
There's a wonderful interview between Oprah and Joe Rowling.
Well, there's one on radio. I know. Is there one on TV also?
I've seen the video of it.
Oh, okay.
I don't know where. I saw it on the computer on a video, so I'm not sure what channel it came from or what show it was on. Yeah.
What was the main takeaway from that particular interview that you remember anyway?
Just both that they both, to me, had such a grasp of possibility and of creating what they wanted to create.
That word possibility is important. I mean, that was the name of the chapter that this particular piece that I read came from. It was entitled Possibility. Possibility is where the dream starts, really, isn't it? Right.
And I think that's what I get from both of them is that they don't automatically just deem things impossible. They saw things as possible, and look what they both created.
I think also there's another piece to the possible, because even with thinking that something is possible, I have long thought that stuff was possible, but at the same time, I always doubted that it was actually going to happen, which means I was basically stepping on my own toes without realizing it.
Yeah, right.
So you also have to not just know what's possible, you have to be willing to believe it to some degree, even if it's a little tiny degree. But what do they say, the size of a mustard seed, that much belief, that much faith, as they say. You got to have at least that to start with. And then you can build it up. You can take advantage of the Abraham concept of keep telling yourself the same thing over and over again, and you can build the idea into a belief over time.
Right. And also, when we have that belief, we're going to take some kind of actions that put us in the realm of opportunity.
Which is what an inspired action really is when it comes down to it. I mean, maybe an idea that comes to you, but that's really what an inspired action is.
Yeah, is that you're believing it, you're feeling it in advance, and then you're willing to entertain the idea that it's absolutely possible. Yes, it's possible, and then you get inspired to take some kind of action, whatever it is, and start moving into that realm of possibility. And I think that there's always other people in that realm. It doesn't happen alone in our closet, right?
Yeah.
Alone in our living room. It's like we make connections however we can.
And that's the joy I've discovered by doing the podcast. There are other people out there, and they actually listen. I don't believe that. They actually listen. That's the part that gets to me. Like, wow, we have listeners. I can't believe it.
We do. We have some fans even. Yeah.
We do. We have big fans. And I'm so glad that they're there, and I hope they keep listening. Before we leave, Cindie, how does somebody reach out to you if they need a little personal coaching? Because sometimes we need that to kind of get off the schneid, so to speak.
Yeah, they can find me online, cindiechavez.com, CindieChavez. Find me and come say hello.
And if you can't say hello, at least tune in to the next episode, because, Cindie, we do that one together, too.
Yeah, tomorrow morning you can actually just call us.
Yeah.
Yay. And we'll coach you on the air, right?
Yeah. So please join us, and we hope that you'll join us not only for that one, but for every episode here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.